Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is your tomorrow video. So the video I'm posting today was the one messing about with the pH meter, calibrating it, or attempting to. And I did say that straight away afterwards I was going to mix up different levels of feed, take a pH reading and make a note of them. And again, tomorrow I'm out. I've got the building surveyor coming round to the old house, and I've still got to clean out the conservatory and have a hoover round because the sisters didn't bother, so I'll have to do it myself. So I've sort of thought, right, well, let's do that all in one go. I've got a bit of shopping to do. Well, we can do the shopping, go round to the house, get all the wiring and clean the conservatory, hoover around the house, be there while the buildings inspector does his thing, and then come on back with everything done for the day. Chances are that I wouldn't film on a day like that. So by filming this today, I've got something for tomorrow. That are my theory, what I have. Right, now I'm not mixing its feed up to actually feed my orchids, but it will get used, I won't waste it. I'm just going to put some water in. So that's RO water. Quantity is irrelevant, and I'm going to add some feed. Now this could be, oops, too much, add some water. Whoops, not enough, and we could fiddle. But what I want is a TDS reading of 100. So I'm going to put a little bit of feed in, because that is a very low value. If I put a bit too much in, we can add some water. Right, lid back on. That stuff sucks moisture out of the air like it's going out of fashion. So I always keep it in an airtight container, and the lid is off for the minimum amount of time. Now luckily with this feed, it dissolves incredibly quickly. Otherwise I'd be here all day waiting for it to dissolve. It literally is that quick. Nothing left, no granules, nothing. So that's dissolved. And we have a reading of far too much. I suppose we could work down, couldn't we? So I want 100, 150 and 200. Well, I've got 186. So if I put some water in, we could get the it's down to 120. 105, doesn't have to be exact, but I'd like to get it, as I'm actually, this is like a calibration, I'd like to get it as near as, damn it. The sploot made no difference at all. That really is a tiny amount. Well, whatever this is, that's going to have to do. Right, that's 101. Right, so that's our first benchmark setting. And now, with our newly calibrated pH meter, what I do is I put some in this glass so that I don't have to stand here waggling this thing around. What I do is I just adjust the depth of that so that it's at the right depth for the pH meter and walk away from it. And I leave that normally for about 30 seconds to a minute, during which time it gets to the area that the actual pH is and settles and gives me a reasonably steady reading, normally between 2 points. So it'll possibly flick between like 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 6.3, 6.4, 6.3. It just flicks around a given point. And I'm quite happy that I can take the middle of that flicking around. Sometimes it doesn't flick hardly at all. But it could depend what's in the feed, because sometimes there could be some added CalMag. There might be some seaweed in that particular run. There might be some, whatever that calcium stuff is, I've forgotten, so I don't use it often enough. calcium nitrate, get there in a minute. So, you know, the actual content could vary, but this is just MSU, which is what I use virtually all the time. Right, let's see what we've got. Right, so what that says, see what I mean? That was a small amount of feed to get it to 100 parts per million. That's a very light level of feed, and that's taken my pH reading down to 5.95. Is it absolutely settled? Yep, it's flicking between 5.94, 5.95. So at 100 parts per million, you can see where this is going, can't you? It's just going to end up far too low. So it's dropped now, it's gone to 5.93. So we'll count that as 5.93. 5.9, isn't it? Don't need the decimal places. Now what we've got to do is add a bit more feed. So we'll put that bit of water back in there. And then what we'll do is we'll add a bit more feed, the idea being that I want to get it to 150 now. So we go from 110 to 150. That's the theory. Any granules left? Nope. Oh, 152. That's plenty close enough, 152, so that's my 150. Get the lid back on there. Get some more water out, give it a rinse, make sure it's good. Get the depth right. Let the pH meter go deaf in here, couldn't you? That boiling. Let the pH meter sit for a bit. And then we'll get our pH at this. I presume you're au fait enough to realise that it's the feed, it's the MSU feed that's dropping the pH. So in theory we should now have a lower reading than 5.9. So if I wasn't checking my pH, if I was just running with this RO water and this feed and wasn't checking the pH, I'd be feeding at a low pH all the time. Which means that quite a few of my macro elements are not getting a good look in, because they tend to work better around the 6.5 mark. And that's all 5 of them basically, 6 if you want to count sulphur, but the NPK, the calcium and the magnesium all work well at 6.5. You start getting down below that, heading towards 6, and the calcium and the magnesium will drop off. So they won't be as efficiently absorbed. Right, what we've got now then. What we've got now is 5 point, you going to settle? 5.7, 7, 6, 7, 8, going up slowly. 7. Right, so 150, as I said, this doesn't have to be totally accurate. It's not a scientific experiment, it's just to give me a rough idea. Well, that's going around 5.78, 7, 8. Yeah, 5.78. That is now lower than I would ever go. I don't ever go that low. Right, now what we've got to do is get it up to 200. What I will get is a difference. Every 50 parts per million is a drop in pH of this amount, so that I can predict 250 and 300. I very rarely go above 300. So the Vander bucket goes to 350 sometimes, but I can predict. You see what I mean? Once I've got 3 bands, providing the gap is the same between the readings, then I can predict what 250 would be without actually doing it. Right, so what are we doing then? We need to get up to 200 now, don't we? See, these ranges, 100, 150 and 200, are roughly what I use most of the time. You know, my cooler, shadier ones with the sensitive roots, Mazda values and stuff like that, they tend to be around 100, maybe 120. And then a normal feed for my mounts, because they get fed so often, is around the 150, possibly as high as 180. And then my pots and things that are actively growing need to be 200 to 250. That's summertime we're talking now, growing season. Not in the middle of winter. This does dissolve quick, which is good. It saves faffing around, doesn't it? 197. Is it worth putting a bit more in? It's not worth it. 197 is close enough. More than close enough. As I said, it's not a scientific experiment. I'm just getting some rough calcs. Right. Let that sit for a bit. Don't need that anymore. Go away. And this water will actually get used on my mounts tomorrow, so it won't get wasted. In fact, it might have to get done today, because I'm just not going to be around tomorrow to be doing things like watering. So we might do it later today. Trouble is they got watered yesterday. Right, what are we doing? Reading. Now the drop this time is much less, so perhaps my idea of getting some bands and thinking the pH is going to drop the same amount with an increase, you know, of 50 parts per million, if you think about it, that is a bit of a daft theory on the grounds that the pH scale is a log scale. Life won't work. So to expect the difference in the pH to be relatively the same given an equal parts per million increase is a bit of a daft idea, really. So this is settling at about 5.7, 5, 6, 5, 4, 5, 5.75, good enough. So the difference this time is a lot less. Which stands to reason, because if you've got a log scale, whatever is increasing your pH, you're going to, as you get lower down the pH scale, you're going to need quite a lot more of it to get that sort of increase. That's my sort of take on it anyway. So what I now know is that if I mix up some feed with my normal RO water, yeah, and it comes out at 100 parts per million, I know that my pH is around 5.9, which is far lower than I want. So, what I was going to say now is, while I'm at it, why don't we, I must remember to go and rinse that, because I haven't got any clean water out here at the moment, so I'll put that to one side. How about we go and get my new stuff, and bring that pH up, and see how much of this new stuff. I'll turn the camera off for a minute while I go and get myself sorted out. Right, let's have a faff. That's a good job, I didn't rinse the Prince pH meter, I'm just going to use it again. Right, so what I'm going to do now is, this is my new stuff, which I haven't even opened yet. I've worked out how to open it. I've got it stood in a pot because it's a liquid in a floppy container, and what I don't want it to do is fall over and pour all over the place. So we take off this band, it doesn't want to come undone. See, now this does not need to be welded on there to such an extent that it won't come off. It doesn't need to be that excessive. Right, I'll undo the top. I'll cut those wings off later. Now the theory is we have our dropper. I presume the dropper fits down there. Not going to be a lot of good if it doesn't. And we pick some of the liquid up. Ooh, it's a pretty green colour. Now I'm going to apply one drip. One drip. Now that was a metric drip, not an imperial drip. We're not working in those old measurements. You've got to get the right size drip. I haven't got a straight face. Right, now what we do is get that to one side and see what one drip has done. Bearing in mind we were at 5.75. One drip may have made no difference. We might need quite a bit more than one drip. I haven't used this before, don't forget. Starting from scratch here. So again, we'll let that sit for a minute or two and we'll see what one drip of this is. Now this is potassium silicate. So we've basically got potassium and silicon, and silicon has some quite magical effects on plants. It just basically makes all the cells stronger, which then becomes the structure of the plant. So it's supposed to be more disease resistant, bug resistant, basically avoids rots and funguses and things like that. It just basically internally strengthens the plant. Whether that amount's going to make that much difference, I really don't know. All I'm using it for is I need a pH up, well obviously, and I don't want something that could be damaging sensitive roots or affecting the balance badly of my other nutrients. So that's why we've got this stuff. So what has one drip done? Oh my goodness. Oh, I love it. One drip has taken us from 5.75 to 6.62. And a stable reading. So it's not an element that messes up the pH meter, because some do. So it's fluctuating a little bit. It's fluctuating now between 6.63 and 6.64. Give it a stir and then it goes back down. As I say, these pH meters are not brilliant, are they? But quite honestly, whether that reading's fluctuating or not, at 200 parts per million, in that amount of water, don't forget, the amount of water, one drip dispersed in that amount of water, which I didn't bother measuring, I could have 3 times this amount of water. One drip's not going to do it, is it? Yeah? So, but it has definitely raised the pH, seems to have stabilised at about 6.57. So let me make a note. One drop. Droop. My R's are like O's. One drop to 6.5. It's fluctuating between 6.55, 6.57, 6.56, 6.5 something. We'll put it down as 7. So with that amount of water, a TDS of 200, one drip of my new stuff would have taken it to a suitable pH to use on the orchid that I'd be happy with. So that's good stuff. And one drip of that in that amount of water can't be dramatically affecting the balance of my MSU elements, nutrients. It can't. It's just too fine a thing. But the thing is with this stuff is that it is very, very alkaline. So the one drop, although it's not adding a lot of chemical elements, it's whacking my pH up to where I want it. Hello, somebody's had a hammer for their birthday. Wonderful. I must expect noise to increase to a level that it's, I mean that's people working. Noise of people working I've got no problem with. People at work, it's good stuff. But it's the school holidays for this week and next week, it's the Easter holidays, which means people often take time off their real jobs and start doing jobs around the home and the garden. Yeah, so there's bound to be a bit more noise around. Right, so our new stuff seems to do the job. That's what I wanted from today, is does it do the job? And obviously it does. Happy with that, very much so. Now that wasn't ridiculously expensive, that little bag. That was the smallest amount I could get, but it wasn't ridiculously expensive. We will now rinse the pH meter and store it. So there you go, there's a few notes there for me that with a recalibrated pH meter, and from memory those readings I think are about the same as last time. Now again, that MSU feed should have buffers in it to stop that pH dramatically changing like that, but who knows what else they put in. I mean, you get a chemical analysis on the side of the tin basically saying, you know, the nutrient elements and their percentages, but they don't tell you about the percentage of buffers, how well they're going to work. And you always get a percentage that if you add up all the elements, it never comes to 100. So there's other stuff in there, some of which is buffers, which may or may not work as well as they should. But anyway, I'm happy that the new stuff isn't going to harm the plants and is going to give me the pH up that I want. Now obviously the volume of water comes into play here, whereas when I'm measuring the pH, whether I've got 1 litre or 2 litres of water is not going to make any difference that's measurable, I doubt. Obviously to get to a given parts per million, again the volume of water is relevant to how much feed I'd have to add to get that TDS reading. But the volume of water doesn't, strictly speaking, affect the pH unless it's a tiny, tiny volume compared with a huge, big volume, which we don't do. You know. So there we go. Playing around, new stuff, new figures to work with, and a better idea of what's going on in there on a day-to-day basis. That's all I was after. Right, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.